Hello, and thank you for being part of this presentation. Ahead of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee considering PEG Valiase for people living with phenylketonuria in March 2026, I wanted to provide some information and tips on how to make a consumer comment. Consumer comments are currently open for this condition and will close on the 21st of January 2026. I'm Louise Healy. I'm Education and Advocacy Manager at Rare Voices Australia, and I'm also the Vice President of the Metabolic Dietary Disorders Association. So just to provide a little bit of background to understand more about how the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, or the PBAC, works. The PBAC is an independent expert body that's appointed by the Australian government and includes people like doctors, health professionals, health economists and consumer representatives. They recommend to government whether or not new medicines should be listed on the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, or PBS. So a medicine can't be listed unless the committee makes a positive recommendation, and the committee meets 3 times every year in March, July and November, and as I said, in March they will be considering PEG Valiase, or sometimes that's commercially called Palynziq, which is a treatment for people with PKU. This is the second time the committee has considered this condition and this treatment, and the first time they decided not to recommend it be listed on the PBS, with a number of concerns that are available in the public summary document, which is publicly available online. The 2 key concerns were around the proposed population that the treatment would be for and the cost effectiveness of the treatment. So when considering a medicine for listing, the PBAC will take into account the medical condition for which the medicine is registered, so that will be PKU in this case, and then looks at clinical effectiveness, safety and cost effectiveness compared with other treatments. And so that's quite important because in this case it is compared with other treatments, and the main treatment it will be compared with is Kuvan. So how does the PBAC engage with consumers? The main way they engage is through the making of a consumer comment, and this can be made through the Office of Health Technology Assessments Consultation Hub. This video will be part of a package of resources that the MDDA has provided, and in that package you'll find a link to the place where you can make a comment. So when thinking about who can make a comment, consumers means anyone essentially who's not the sponsor, so that can mean a person diagnosed with the condition, their family and friends, a clinician treating people with the condition, researchers, or even general members of the public. And some of you will know from other times that treatments for inborn errors of protein metabolism have gone to the PBAC, that sometimes many of your family, friends, relatives and supporters may have made a comment. Now, I don't know how long ago it was you made a comment, but the website and the way to make a comment has had some significant improvements to make it easier for consumers to make a comment. So when you go into the site, there's actually a consultation survey, and that asks questions about what it's like to live with a condition and what you think the advantages or disadvantages might be of a particular treatment. And they also provide in the survey plenty of guidance about the kinds of things that the committee is most interested in you talking about. So in rare disease treatments, like treatments for PKU, consumer input is really important. Consumer input is always important, but it is often additionally important in rare disease treatments, because rare diseases obviously are for a small number of people. The volume of data is collected in a clinical trial is usually much less than traditional clinical trials, because the conditions are quite variable in their presentation. The benefits of the treatment are also variable for people. So often there's quite a lot of uncertainty around the potential benefits of the treatment, who would benefit most and what the impacts of the treatment would be. And patients have evidence that can address those gaps in knowledge or the uncertainties that the committee is trying to work out how to manage. So lived experience, people with lived experience have evidence about things like what's the burden of caring as for the condition as it currently stands with the treatment options. So you might be able to talk about how long it takes to manage the condition daily, how the condition impacts on your ability to participate in work, school, social lives. You might be able to talk about how it impacts on other health issues that you might feel are associated with either having the condition or the nature of the treatment for the condition. And what lived experience and information that we provide as consumers does, it helps to explain what clinical data actually means to people living with a rare condition like PKU. So the sponsor will be providing lots and lots of clinical data, measurements about how the treatment affected that clinical endpoint. In PKU, the main clinical endpoint that will be looked at is reduction in blood Phe concentration, blood phenylalanine concentration. And a question the committee's always had for us as an organisation is, what does a reduction in Phe concentration actually mean to a patient? What's important about it? How does it impact on them? And they're the things that you can talk to. And that might include that you might feel like you feel better with lower Phe levels. It might give you more freedom in your dietary options. You might feel it's healthier to be able to eat more natural protein. You might feel that a more normal diet, whatever that means, but a more normal diet would help you with some other comorbidities or conditions that you have that are associated with having PKU. So there's some of the things that you can talk about when you're making a comment. So this is just a picture of what the Office of Health Technology Assessment Consultation Hub looks like. And you can see at the top there's a link to PBAC consultations. In the documentation that I've provided, there's a link directly into the current PBAC consultation. All you'll need to do when you go there is go to the drop-down menu and make sure that you select the right treatment. So in the menu, you'll notice that the generic name, pegvaliase, is listed before the commercial name. In this case, the commercial name is Palynziq. So look for pegvaliase and click on that one. And then the survey will ask you for some basic demographic information and some information about whether or not you have a conflict of interest. And a conflict of interest could be about a professional conflict of interest, which might be that you work for a pharmaceutical company. It might be a commercial conflict of interest where you might gain some commercial benefit from this treatment being paid for by the government, or it might be a personal conflict of interest. And I usually tick that one when I'm making a personal comment and declare that I'm the parent of someone with the condition that the treatment is for. The 5 main questions, though, apart from the demographic questions that you'll be asked are here. So you'll be asked to outline your experience with the health and medical condition, and that's just an opportunity for you to talk about from your perspective what it's like for you or a person you know to live with PKU and what you know about that. There's an opportunity to talk about how it's currently treated. So in that you would talk about the treatment options that are available at the moment in Australia. The treatment options that are available are dietary therapy alone, so with no medication, or some people may have dietary therapy plus sapropterin. Sapropterin is the generic name of Kuvan. So they're the sorts of things that you can talk about, and you can talk about how that impacts on you, how the current treatment options impact you and what your experience is. In the next question, you're asked to see what the advantage of having access to this proposed medicine would be, particularly for people with the condition and or the family or carers. And in some people ask maybe could grandparents put in and what should they talk about? And if a grandparent, if a friend, if a relative is putting their own comment in, they should put it in from their own perspective and just talk about what they've seen about how having someone with PKU in the family has impacted on the family and why they see that this would be of benefit. Then it's also important that you might talk about the disadvantages of the proposed medicine, as we're aware, and if you watch Professor Harding's presentation, which was given at the recent MDDA retreat, but is also available as part of this package, you'll see that there's potential benefits, but there's also potential side effects, and you might want to comment on those and what your perspective on those is. And the committee will be very aware of those potential side effects, and in this case, for example, there is a high rate of allergic or anaphylactic reactions. They'll be aware of those, so you might comment on those and what you think about them in terms of what you think, how they balance out with what you see the potential benefits might be. And then you can provide any additional comments that you'd like the PBAC to consider. And in this case, some people may want to comment on the proposed restriction. So there is a new proposed restriction. In the previous submission, the MDDA and clinicians treating people with PKU felt that the proposed restriction, which was for people who did not respond to Kuvan, was too narrow, and that there were a group of people who, even with Kuvan, had very limited protein tolerance, and therefore still had an incredibly restricted dietary management with all the challenges that go with that. And so earlier this year, we consulted with the community through a community meeting and also a community survey about what would be a proposed restriction. So we were asked by the government and the sponsor to suggest who in the PKU population had the most need for this treatment. And so the new restriction proposes that people who do not respond to Kuvan and or people who have less than 15 grams per day natural tolerance to protein, that's with or without Kuvan. And when we say 15 grams, it would be 15 grams to help you maintain the recommended blood Phe concentration, which is less than 360. So if you would require less than 15 grams a day of protein in order to maintain a level within the recommended range, then you would also be eligible. And it was determined that that group under 15 grams was a group who had a high level of need, not saying that people above that don't have a level of need, but we were asked to say how could we define the group who had the highest level of need, and that's how the community came up. That's the recommendation the community came up with. So just a few tips about when you're writing it. So it can be quite easy to do it. Some people take 10 minutes, some people take half an hour. You can give as much as little detail as you want and within the capacity that you're doing. But here's some things to do and not do. So don't give general information. So saying PKU impacts on my quality of life is general. Being specific about how it impacts on your quality of life is more important. So you might talk about living with PKU means that I can never socialise with, or my child can never socialise with their friends outside of school and go out to a cafe and restaurant, and they're excluded from many social activities because of that. So just make sure that when you're talking about things, make sure you're quite specific about those things, because when you're specific and really describe it, that can be used as evidence by the committee. General comments about quality of life, it's difficult to use them. You might talk about, I've got a teenager and with under 15 grams of protein per day natural tolerance, I'm never able to keep them full. They're always hungry, and it's a really stressful struggle for us to manage that. So the other thing is don't cut and paste. So there is no point or value in everyone putting in exactly the same submission, or even if your family and friends want to put in a submission, just copying yours and put it in does not add in any value. The current committee has assessed treatments for PKU several times now. They are very familiar with our community and the challenges that we have. They were quite open in the public summary document for the last consideration of this treatment that they recognise that there's an unmet need in this population. They recognise that this treatment has a clinical place in Australia. So we're not trying to get lots and lots of volume. We're trying to demonstrate from our own perspective what the need for this treatment is. So please don't do copy and paste submissions, just write from your own words and your own perspective, and that will really be much more powerful than any form or template response. So the other thing is, don't explain the condition. So the sponsor, so in health technology assessment, which is what the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee do, the sponsor is the person who submits for reimbursement, and it's usually a pharmaceutical company. In this case, it's BioMarin. So the sponsor will have put in a huge dossier of information explaining the treatment in quite clinical detail, providing evidence and research papers. There's no need for us to do that. What we can explain is what the reality of living with the condition is. So explaining high Phe and low tyrosine and those sorts of things doesn't really help a committee know, well, what does that actually mean to live day to day. So just make sure that you really explain what it's like to live with the condition as best you can. And it doesn't all have to be it's terrible. There are some people who can say things that are positive about it as well. Just really provide that evidence and information so the committee has a good picture of, if this treatment came, what impact it would have for patients. The next thing is, don't submit published literature and stats. Once again, the committee will have access to pretty much any published literature and statistics in relation to this condition. They don't need that from us. Just put in the numbers that matter to you. And as I said, the numbers that matter to you might be the number of hours per week you spend managing the condition, or per day you spend managing the condition. The numbers might be how costly it is to keep up a supply of low protein foods to meet the protein restrictions of the diet. So they're the sorts of numbers that you can talk about. Don't worry about the scientific and statistical information. Next, you don't have to explain the treatment. Again, the sponsor will have explained it in great detail, and there's no benefit in you explaining it. Explain the reality of having or not having the treatment. That's what you need to explain to the committee. So if you think that people who have a protein tolerance of less than 15 grams a day, or people who don't have any access to Kuvan, and they do tend to be people who are on lower allowances, explain what you think it's like for them, or if it's you, what it's like for you, so the committee can understand, again, the impact of access to this treatment for our community. So in summary, your experience and input is important. Speak in your own words and be specific. And the consultation survey has plenty of helpful guidance about what to talk about in your answer. So if you get in there and unsure, just make sure you click on the drop-down menu, and the drop-down menu will give you plenty of information about what to talk about, or you could rewatch this video. And if you have any further questions that you feel are not covered by that, please feel free to reach out to the MDDA office or myself, Louise, at mdda.org.au. I really encourage you to put in a comment. Our voice is important, and this is a community who has a really great track record of really providing useful, meaningful feedback to help the PBAC make its decision. And I hope this is another one. And I think, I would really think it's important for us to see access to more and more treatments all of the time, and this would be another step in that direction. So thank you, and please reach out if you have any other questions.